about this time last year, Manna, we did a little podcast called The Sage and the Skeptic. And I know that a lot of things have changed since then. And you want to sort of share what's going on and what's happening and the direction that you've now taken, you know, full in, full on. So I guess I'd like to, you know, for everybody to know a little bit more about that. So tell us, you know, you started a program called Let's Talk Trauma, which is a monthly healing session. So tell us a little bit why you did that and why this change in direction.
All right. So last year when we did Sage and Skeptic, and we really received very good response from people, and everybody had quite insightful and interesting conversations and comments about it. And also throughout those responses, what I also realized is, while we are all focusing on the solution and while we are focusing on that end result, we somehow are failing to focus on the essentials that we really need to understand and move beyond that. And working with all the clients, and I was thinking, oh, is it just trauma? Is it just trauma? But then as I thought about it, I realized it is not just trauma, it is trauma. And all of us, so the change that we want to make at the end by making people mindful or giving people some tools to be resilient or asking them to be better humans, it does not begin today. It should start right at the base. So, and that is where I realized that trauma has a much bigger impact than I ever imagined on everybody. And also, I think I realized that in general, we think trauma means something major. Trauma means something catastrophizing, something, an accident or an abuse or an assault. Only that is trauma. However, we fail to understand the impact of the biomemories and the impact of those biomemories which are traumatic, which is intergenerational or ancestral, while the individual has nothing to do, or they must have not experienced anything catastrophic right now, but that has an impact, that has a role to play. So we tend to focus only on responses based on trauma that has been experienced by the individual themselves. However, we fail to understand the impact of that biomemories, the ancestral, the intergenerational as well. And unless we truly resolve that memory and that emotion, we will not be able to move forward, how much ever we focus on living in the moment, focusing on the now. It will not help because it's an elastic band effect. You go back straight into that old memory. So I am now in a place where I can say it's truly about living in the moment. The memory does not really have an impact on me. However, we do have unbiased, unconscious memories that will play a role. And only if you do some work, you will be able to understand that. However, the impact has already been done. It's there, and we are not realizing it. We are not creating enough spaces for people to heal from that trauma. So, and I thought that actually compelled me to think about, right, I'm thinking I'm limiting to trauma, but actually that is the real impact. That is where the real shift lies. And when that is my gift, I thought we should get this message to many and create that space for many to come and involve, be part of it, and make this a conversation so that we are all aware of it. And so that's how the Let's Talk Trauma, and we reached, thankfully, we could reach many people around the world.
Yeah, and it's really truly awesome to see, in the way that it's growing is absolutely fantastic. So tell me then a little bit what, you know, you've told me the reason why you want to do, but why this free event that you want to run every month? why is it important to you that you reach this amount of people through doing it, different to sort of your one-on-ones that you generally do with people?
What I realized working with so many people and also understanding their stories is majority of my clients are coming to me after spending at least 10 to 20 years in different therapies, modalities, techniques, and different healing modalities. And I also realized the essential piece that others are missing in this entire process. And that essential piece, and when I now put that steps to recovery, the 6 steps to recovery, I realized through the journey that everyone else is focusing on the 5th or 6th step and trying to push people move forward. And they're forgetting the 4 essential steps behind. So the key is to start working wherever you are, how many years you worked on or decades you worked on yourself. The key is to getting back to basics and start from the very first step to recovery. And that very first step to recovery is not in talking therapy, and it is not in giving resilience tools or mindfulness tools or overcoming the memory or trauma tools. It's not about that. There is no harshness about it. It is about being gentle at the same time, taking the decision. It's about working on those memories. So let's talk trauma. Why it is important for me is to spread this awareness to people that if they feel they're too fixed to be broken, or if it is too hard, or if it is too painful, it is about giving themselves one more chance, just one more chance. And if I can help them there, I think we are making an impact and we are helping people to move past the trauma.
Great. So I guess my next question is, you talked about that there are 6 steps and most people start at the wrong end. Is that fair to say? So is that on the 5th or the 6th step? And you said so why are they not accessing the first 4 steps, or what do you see that's missing where whether it's a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist or any other healing modality, what are they missing that they're not seeing these first 4 steps?
It's
Are they misunderstanding? Are they misunderstanding something, or is it, what do you see?
It's the attachment. It's the attachment to logic, structure, academia, and certificates and titles. It's the attachment to that we are thinking humans and minds and bodies will also work like machines by doing X plus Y that equals a Z. That's the understanding. So you cannot, it's almost like you cannot speak logic to a child, can you? How much ever logical you are as a parent, can you be logical to your child? As a baby, when they're growing, you can't. So as a parent, you assume the role of being illogical, don't you? And you start seeing fun in their world. However, when it comes to trauma and when it comes to people who are experiencing the symptoms and the triggers of trauma, I think the mainstream therapies are failing to go beyond their logic and go beyond their structure. I see that happening. And so the people who are logical and who are structured are becoming even more logical and even more structured. And the people who want to believe in abstracts and no logic are becoming even more abstract and even more illogical. But there should be a balance between these two worlds, because there are many things that we cannot perceive or experience physically, but we can only experience it when we shut down the logic. And there are certain things, only when you shut down the emotion and abstract, you can see it logically. So it's the fine line between these two worlds. And to simply say that memory and emotions are not physical, isn't it? They are very abstract. And when you're working with a conscious mind, you're thinking you're accessing those memories or emotions. And again, we get carried away because, again, we are so carried away by structure. We talk about subconscious mind, but these memories or emotions are beyond this conscious subconscious mind. But conscious subconscious mind is the label and a filter of a logical mind, of a structured mind to approach in that format. But it takes a therapist to understand and break their structure in order to understand this structureless, but having a major impact on someone who experienced trauma. To that extent, I will not confine it to just someone who experienced trauma. All of us as human beings, if we are hanging on to some memories, that is not perceivable or comprehensible by logic alone. So we have to understand this fine line between the abstract world and the logical world. So what I'm seeing is the mainstream therapies and many other healing modalities. Here it's not just about the mainstream, even many other healing modalities. They are so focused on healing themselves, perhaps, and they are not breaking their own filters and barriers because it is their identity. And if they break this structure, I think it will break them. So they are resistant to do that. However, for a therapist or a healer or a coach to truly give the impact, they should be okay to break themselves and to break their own identities. That is when you will be able to really see the transition. So step 1, step 2 to step 6. So, but because we are so stuck on the step 5 and step 6, which is perceivable, which is understandable, which is relatable by way of a behavior or symptom or their actions, you are thinking you can change it there, but you can't. So in order to repair a machine or a car, and you will not just go into just repairing the exteriors, isn't it? You really have to rip open the vehicle and see what is underneath to see what's happening there. So it's the same. It's the same with the journey of body and mind.
Yeah, great. So I guess what you're saying there is that people get stuck in their own framework. So they get stuck in their own, so for example, a traditional talk therapist may get stuck in, this is the way you do it, and won't look outside that, as well as somebody who is a Reiki healer or a pranic healer or somatic healer gets stuck in their own. Is that fair to say that both are stuck in their own framework without looking beyond that to get a full body or whole being healing for someone? Is that right?
Yeah, because everybody is right, but not just as being one on their own. So the talking therapy is required at one point of time in this journey. The so-called healing is required because in many ways it's a placebo. So you do need that sort of healing for them to experience it. For a person who experienced something traumatic must be going through all of those things, but it is not exclusive on its own. So you need series of all these things. But because of believing in one thing, if you're excluding the possibility on either sides, then you're not doing it right. So we are not, a vehicle is not just an engine, isn't it? It's many parts. So the same way, this human being is just not talking or just not healing, but it is beyond. It's talking plus healing plus the abstracts as well. And those abstracts, unless you truly focus on understanding the logic of the abstracts, you cannot function in the abstract world. So to those abstracts, which are emotions and memories, there is a logic too. And that logic is not comprehensible or perceivable by a mind that didn't experience that, or by a mind that didn't break those barriers. It cannot see that. So what I'm saying is, it can sound quite contradicting here, but an abstract has a logic too. And can you see that structure in that abstract? Are you able to see that?
So you mentioned as well that, these 6 steps to trauma recovery, and you go through different stages of that. So I guess now would be a good time for you to, explain a little bit about that, because this might be new. Well, this will be new to most people, especially if they're only working into that 5th or 6th step, as you mentioned. So I guess I just want to throw it over to you and say, so what are the 6 steps? And where are people generally getting stuck in their journey?
Yeah. So just rule of thumb, if you work on yourself or on this memory or on this experience, at least for 2 to 3 years, and still you're not feeling okay, that means you didn't even start working on the first step, and you're only stuck on the 5th or 6th steps without working on the foundations. It's a general rule of thumb. So the first step is where you operate a lot on the abstracts. That is where you're just not focusing on this lifetime's experiences and memories and decisions. You're working on quite a complex abstracts right at the first step. Right at that first step, when somebody experienced something traumatic, or again, traumatic does not mean we technically classify it as complex, major, minor, but trauma really, if you understand, if you assign a spiritual and a philosophical aspect to trauma, my plant dying can be traumatic for me. And that can shatter my world, because you don't know what that plant means to me. So you may be thinking it's just a plant, but it's not. So my whole identity, my whole story may be dependent on that simple plant, which is not a big thing. So you cannot classify trauma as complex, major, minor, just because of so-called norms. It is very individual to individual. And that abstract is the very first step to work on.
So are you saying there that everybody is suffering from some kind of trauma? Because if a plant dies, that might be where you are, but to somebody else, it might be something completely different and completely huge. So do we all have an element of trauma within us?
Yes, we do. So, and that's the reason, that's the thing to understand, because we are making trauma as something there that only few people have experienced. But the truth is, we all in different forms have experienced trauma, and just that we are not realizing it yet because it is not keeping us stuck. Okay. So what is important to understand is, in the 6 steps to recovery, in the very first step, you have to work on the memories and emotions first. The order may change based on where the person is and how disconnected they choose to be as a result of everything they're experiencing. But the very first step is to work on that abstract that has a logic and a structure. And you have to spend enough time in that space. And in that space, when you're accessing it, you'll be surprised how much memory your body carries and how much memory that your mind carries that is no way connected to the experience itself.
Hang on. Can I stop you there? So you're saying we're carrying memories or experiences in our body?
Yeah.
Okay, so would you like to just go into that a little bit, because that for a lot of people will be a little bit hard to understand, because we think of the mind, we think of the brain, we think of that's where we store everything. So maybe you could just dig into that a little bit first.
Yeah. So the very first point of contact of any experience, but for any human being, is body, is through your 6 senses, not 5 senses, because your mind is also part of your body, the 6th sense. So the very first impact that you take as a human being is through these five senses. Then the mind, the sixth sense. So even if the individual chooses to forget the memory, which they think is mind, the body keeps the score. And that body remembers everything.
Okay. So does that mean then that so even if you have no conscious memory of something that happened, then you still have a memory in the body of that?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, so I do have clients who don't have any conscious memory of their first 15 years, of their first 30 years. They don't have any conscious memory. And still, I could give them the result in the first session only because you really don't need, because only if you're too logical, you need conscious memories. But if you understand the logic of the abstracts, you can work in that space and your body brings those memories. It brings it up. So the body is constantly trying to protect itself while your mind is also trying to protect itself. And unless that person, that individual feels safe, they will not allow the body to open up or the mind to open up. And only when they feel safe and they can trust, they will allow the body to open up and the mind to open up. And that body and mind will bring up the memories, which are not the memories the way we think, that we have representation systems, the way it's not at all that. It's just a feeling with no name, no labels. And the body brings it up. And once we understand that very first step of resolving that, and that is not necessarily your own decisions or your own life choices or your own understanding of the world, because we all carry the biomemories, not just the memories of we brought up and living in this life. We carry the biomemories in our cells. We carry the biomemory in our DNA. However, we don't tap into it. And we don't need big machines to access that. All you need as a coach or a therapist, if you are able to see beyond those barriers of your labels and filters, you can help an individual to access those memories just like that. And if you see in Let's Talk Trauma and the emotional healing we are doing, people are accessing those memories without sharing a story. I don't even know what they went through. I don't even know what their life experiences are. But I understand the logic in that abstract. And you can see how people are accessing those memories and they're releasing it.
Yeah, and look, I come along to Let's Talk Trauma myself, and I see the impact it has on people. And nobody knows anything about anybody else. Nobody shares any of their stories. So it's incredible to see the impact it seems to have on their body. And it's very physical impact.
Sure.
You know, and it's incredible to watch, and it's incredible to see, especially when people seem to go through so much just in that session alone. So from my understanding, what you're saying is these bio memories and these memories that we have in our body are always there, and we have to heal them first before we go on to the memories. Or does it actually bring up memories for people?
It brings up the memories for the people. So that's why I'm saying the very first step to recovery is to work on those memories. The very first step is to work on the memory itself, because the moment that is an expressed emotion, which is again based on an expressed memory. So the very moment we work on that, that means you're ready to bring those memories up. So your body is still bringing up only those memories that it thinks it's okay to release. They are active memories. They are expressed memories or expressed emotions. And only when you release that, it's almost like your tank is full. And unless you release that water, that overflow, you cannot really get to the root. You cannot really get to the source. So the very first step is to work on those memories by accessing. And again, it's just not about accessing a memory from the body. It's about the person who is working with an individual to be able to understand how that structure is working. And by seeing a person, you will be able to understand how they are layering those memories and how they are layering those emotions. It's very important to understand that. And then once you are able to tap into that and they release that memories and emotions, which their body and mind is ready to release, only by doing that, the individual can see what is underneath. Only when you go deep, you will realize that there is light under the sea. You go there. And then the next step to that is they'll be ready to allow the next suppressed memories and suppressed emotions to come up.
So just let me get this right. So for the first step, we work on the body's conscious memories, what it's ready to let go of.
Yeah, they're not conscious memories because they don't remember any of them. Individuals don't even realize any of them. But those are the memories that you are helping them to access, which the body and mind is ready to release. However, you don't know that, so you keep them intact. You don't touch them. And without touching any of these, you're trying to work on step 5 and 6. Again, it's almost, as I said, it's about pushing the car with all your manpower and strength, and you're building your muscle to push the car, but the brakes are on. So the moment you stop giving that manpower or stop that willpower, some people believe in willpower, right? I'll resolve and I'll do it. And then once you stop it, you fall back to step 1. And then that's where your panic attacks, you can't get out of the bed, and you develop diseases in the body, you can't move, you don't want to face people, or you become extremely independent and you get at the same time easily triggered. So without working on this, there's no point in working on here, on the symptom itself, whether it is anxiety, depression, or a grief, or a jealousy, or stuck state, or relationships, or health issues. No point in working that as a band-aid solution. The key is you have to open the car, open the vehicle to see where the problem is and which part is loose, which part is wrong. It's important to go back. So many people say, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to, but you're only doing a band-aid, isn't it? So it's important to go there, but it is also important to go there. And most of the times people are worried that they don't want to share the story or relive the experience, because that's what they've been doing in this step 5 and 6, years and years, sharing their story. And the person, the mechanic, is not able to identify. So they're ripping apart everything, but they're not really finding out where the problem is. So you have to come back to this part. So the mechanic should know which part to open and where.
Sure. So I guess we should move on to the second step then, which is, did you say that's suppressed memories?
Yeah, that's the suppressed memories and emotions. So at that point, every suppressed memory is also followed by an emotion. So at this point, you will be having a label and a name for your feeling by this time. Because the very first one is a feeling. You don't even know what is it. It's just that you know there's a feeling. And then the second step is where you are even experiencing an emotion and you can name it. So again, if I do the second step first and the first step later, it won't work because you're still working only on a surface level. So then the second step is to work on those suppressed emotions and memories where you do have a name to it. Not that you don't have a name, you will be able to identify it. And when
you'll be able to identify where it comes from, or
where it comes from, what is the name of that feeling, where is it, the source of that memory, you will be able to identify it. In the very first step, even though we are working with a trauma or a trauma trigger, you are not even accessing the experience itself because it is abstract. Right? However, the mind tends to connect itself to the event or the experience, but most of the very first step, what they're doing is unknown to themselves. That's where they're working. Only when they come to the second step, like we did this morning, then only they'll realize there is some memory to it. There is some source to it. And then once we do the first step, it is interesting how many people will come up with new memories, new stories, and they'll say that memory popped up, or this happened, or I couldn't let go, or I went to this, like an elastic band, I went back to that memory. So now they're able to identify, pick and choose those memories, pick and choose the emotions, and they're able to label it. And as long as, if you're able to do that, that means you already made progress. Because the first step is where they don't even know where is this coming from. So they will usually say it's because of the trauma. The second step is where you know that awareness kicked in and they can identify, okay, this is the memory, or this is the person, or this is the time. They'll be at least able to identify that. That's the second step. And there we work on their emotions and memories. It's the same, but different, because it's no more the once the body is ready to release, because it released in the first step, and then you're going deeper, and here you're understanding what else is underlying. So by this time, they can get impatient because I released a lot over there, but you never access this box. You never opened this box. So first time you're opening this box, and that can be very painful too. So that's the second step, where we again work on the suppressed memories and suppressed emotions.
Okay, so it's pretty much like the first step, but now they're more aware of what's going on. So you're doing a similar sort of thing as you would in the first step, and you're doing that in the second.
Yeah.
So what about then as we move forward? What's the next step in this process, and how do we overcome that?
Yeah. So as I explained, the first impact on any human being when they experience something traumatic in technical terms, or non-traumatic in technical terms, is the body, 5 senses. And once you resolve those 5 senses, which is not in your logical purview, not in your logical vision, once you resolve those 5 senses, which sounds silly to many, but only after working on that 5 senses, you can even at least tap into the mind, because mind is just a meaning-making machine. So the third step is where you are at least stepping into the mind aspect while you still keep working with the emotion and the other things, but you're at least tapping into mind, and then you can be a little more logical and you can understand the conflicts. Because what happens is when someone experiences it's interesting, Andy, here, because referring back to the plant example, when a plant dies, for example, right, because I'm having plants here and I'm seeing it, so I'm giving that. So when a plant dies, based on whatever memory or whatever is on my mind, I can say, I'm such an irresponsible person, I killed the plant. Can you see, right at the moment, it does not have to be traumatic. In that moment, I associated an identity, I assumed an identity, a person responsible for killing, whether killing a plant, killing a pet, killing a human, does not matter. I associated myself as a person responsible for some life. That meaning is my assumed identity, isn't it, at that point of time? That assumed trauma identity. That if plants don't matter to you, and if pets and humans matter to you, you may be thinking it's just a plant. But for the person who experienced it, that's not at all about a plant. It's about the mind itself. What identity that mind has assumed at that point of time. And it's a sudden shock to that mind, because it is enjoying that, whatever that is, it is enjoying it, and sudden shock. And in that shock, it froze that identity, that I'm responsible for killing this life, or I'm responsible for taking someone's life or something's life. That identity is frozen. And as you know, now if we come to the logic, as you know, we have conscious and subconscious. We see what we see, and we also don't see what we see. And in those moments of distress, in those moments of protection, the so-called subconscious, that is the things you didn't see but you saw, they will come to the forefront and they will define your personality. So
can you just go into that a little bit before we move forward, just so we've got some clarity around that? So you say you see what you see, but you see what you didn't see.
Right. So it's almost, so you're looking at me right now and you're registering few things. So you're seeing what you're seeing. You at the moment, it can be me, my clothes or my voice. That's what you're listening. But you're also registering that there are plants in my background, there are colors in my background. So you're seeing them, but you're still not seeing them, aren't you? Because you're not registering it. But this is something that you're consciously registering it. But this is in your peripheral vision anyway. Right? So those that you didn't register right now in this moment consciously into your brain or into your mind, when some other situation happens or when something similar happens, your mind is a meaning-making machine. It will bring this memory of the things that you didn't see now. It will bring that memory here and say, right, it looks something like this. And you'll naturally feel familiar with it. It is that thing that you didn't see in spite of being there, in spite of seeing this.
So I get that, how that then can work with, like you say, seeing, I see a couple of plants in your background now, 3, in fact, I've just seen another one there. There's a clock on the wall, but I'm not consciously aware of that. How does that relate then to somebody who's gone through an event and has made a meaning from that, or traumatic meaning?
Yeah. So we only register few bits of data of everything that is happening. So just because you're registering and remembering a few bits of data does not mean your mind didn't register all the data. Your mind has registered all the data that's in this memory database. Just that you don't access it because you're so engrossed in this data processing. Once you process this data, it will access this data from here. And when that data comes in, it's another meaning, isn't it? It's another meaning. It's another meaning. It's another meaning that the mind starts bringing forward, and it's making a meaning. And how much you attach to it determines how complex or how deep you can go into that experience itself. So the third step is where the assumed identity comes from that conflict, because with the plant, I said, I killed the plant, or I'm responsible for taking a life. So I'm believing for the first time that I'm capable of taking some life.
And how does that then affect it? I guess that's to some people not, but to some people that might be a sort of frivolous thing, talking about, I'm responsible. So what does that identity, how does that manifest itself then into an assumed identity for somebody? And how do they then attach other meanings to that?
So the first step is, but here we are talking about an experience, one experience on its own, isn't it? But right this moment, you're not having one experience, aren't you? You're having multiple experiences right now. As you're looking at me, listening to me, you're also having your feelings working, you're seeing something, you're hearing something. At the same time, all these senses are working and creating multiple experiences at the same time, isn't it? So right now, as you're talking to me, you're already creating so many identities of your own, that I like it, I don't like it, this is good, this is not good, I'm understanding this, I'm not understanding this. They are all, as an example, they are all different identities. So now if you take it to life, and if somebody who experienced a traumatic event, for example, and in that moment, if that body or the mind is giving up, thinking, I'm helpless, I can't do anything, and they give up. In that one moment, again, frozen moment, they felt helpless, and they give up. When they give up, then every other experience that they're experiencing after that, every time the body and mind is trying to protect itself, and it will create multiple identities. So another identity can come up and say, I don't want to give up every time. I will fight for it. I am not a weak person. That's another identity in the same person, isn't it? How many times have we experienced that? One point of time we feel helpless, and the next situation, we think, no, I won't be helpless. I will fight for it. So you created already two identities now, isn't it? So the mind is storing these two things. All right, so I'm helpless. I will fight for it. Conflict. I'm a helpless person. I'm a fighter. So you keep fighting. And then after a point when the will dies, you will fall back into helpless state. So which identity are you talking about? So you can take this fighter identity at work and a helpless identity at home, or take the helpless identity to work and the fighter identity at home. Constant conflict, isn't it?
Mhm.
You have to give in to something once you finish, once you're done with it. So you can give up your willpower to be helpless and choose to be a fighter and fight your whole lifetime fighting. And you can go ahead with creativity. You can say, I created this organization, this business, this world, this country, and you're focusing on being a fighter. But deep within, the point comes when the distraction stops. Then you have to face these conflicts too, and then you have to choose which one. Otherwise, you're pulled between these two. However, if I am the coach or a therapist who is working at that last step, and if I'm seeing a fighter, and if I'm helping them to be right, how you can get your voice heard, how can you be seen, how can your message reach millions in the world? And if that is where I'm working with that fighter, I'm not addressing their conflict, am I?
So you could say that you're trying to address what might be a perceived strength, and this is a really determined person who's pushing forward. But I guess that's why that then sometimes people, you know, like you rightly say, just don't want to get out of the bed, because it's like, you know, I can't show up to the world this way anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so
So
they
who are
go
you?
back into the sadness.
Right. So who are you without that perceived strength? So that is where, when they lose a loved one or they lose their job, which they're fighting, and they're so aggressive and they want to do something about it. And then at that moments, in those moments, the grief or the loss or the guilt or the regrets, they can hit them hard, because that has been their distraction, and the distraction has been their purpose and their motivation. And as long as that is there and somebody is taking care of it by luck or by chance, then they will never stop to think about it, and life can go on that way, no problem. But the people who feel stuck in this trauma or stuck are the ones where that distraction is over. Then who are you? Who am I without my partner? I lost my partner. Who am I without this job that I worked for my whole life? I wasted my time. Where is it coming from? Because they're a fighter. They have to live this life. And all of a sudden, they bring those abstract frameworks and they get stuck.
So that's been attached to their identity.
Yeah, because it's an assumed trauma identity.
Yeah.
That's right. And if I am not able to identify that conflict, or if I'm as a coach or a therapist, I'm not able to see that conflict, I would be saying, good, I can give you more goals. I can motivate you to do more. I can teach you how to be productive. I can teach you how to be time management. I can teach you all those things to do that. But a point comes, who are you without all this? Do you even matter to yourself? Without this hard work, or without this struggle, or without this fighter, without creating, who are you? So as long as something happens to support it and life moves on, good. But this is life, isn't it? Ups and downs. And then when the downs hit, can you withstand? And that's where that conflicted identities, they will impact you.
So they've got it. So I guess then you work through resolving these conflicts, these identity conflicts. Is that right? And then what do you move on to from there?
Yeah. So once you resolve those identity, you would not necessarily resolve anything, Andy, because the truth is, people are very intelligent beings. Humans are very intelligent beings, just that we all have some blind spots. And the moment they see it, it's like, you never want to go and crash on a vehicle on the road if you are in your senses, aren't you? It's your blind spot. So when you don't see a vehicle, then you may go and hit it accidentally. Or you are totally doing something wrong. You're drunk or you're on drugs, and then you don't even have senses. You're not even in your senses to do that. So, but people are, 99.9% of the people are very intelligent beings. If they see it, they'll stop it. But just that they never saw that. They never saw the real thing.
Mm.
So our job is in really showing that matters, because it's almost like people want to lose weight. As long as you're showing them the scales and asking them to lose weight, how long can they be motivated? Because that's not the blind spot. Show them the real thing. And once they see it, oh, all right, and they'll naturally change. They'll naturally move. So what we are doing is, once we do work on the identity conflict, then we start moving into how these identity conflicts are becoming their values, their choices, their beliefs. And again, only because we have so many people working on the symptoms, they make these values, choices, beliefs, decisions, they almost like set in stone. This is who you are. But that's a symptom of this identity conflict. So
hang on, sorry. So your values that you may hold in high regard for yourself, that's a symptom of your identity conflict, or symptom essentially of your trauma.
Yeah, that's a symptom of your identity conflict. Identity conflict is stemming from their suppressed emotions and memories and the assumed identity.
That would be a lot. That would be really hard for a lot of people to really get their head around.
Yeah.
That they've because we hold on to our values, whether it's honesty or whether it's, family or trust or whatever that is, we hold on to them in such high regard. I think that's who we hold ourselves to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that a hard step for people to sort of really understand and break that? Or is that something that they just have to change the values, or what happens in that situation?
It can be harsh when I say this, but the truth is you have to break it before you rebuild it. And unless you have that understanding that you're breaking it for a reason, and you know that you're going to rebuild it. But the point is, how many people have that knowledge and awareness that, it's in a leadership aspect, we talk about people who are, what's the word for that, where they are very famous for deconstructing, disruptors. So you have to disrupt the entire system sometimes to build a new system. So you can go ahead, if the repairs are minor, you can go ahead with small tweaks and small band-aids and small solutions. But when you're stuck and when you're not able to move forward, you have to disrupt, and you should be okay to disrupt your own system. And that's a big step. That's a very big step, to disrupt your own system consciously, knowing that you can rebuild it. So that is where you should be a very good change manager, and you should be knowing it, like, the steps, right? When you have a shock, you have anger, you have denial, then you go down, and then you accept, and then you become normal. So it's not that you should not be realizing them as you go through them. You should be knowing them beforehand that that's coming and you're prepared for it. So you should be ready to disrupt yourself at that point of time. And to disrupt, and when you are a coach or a therapist at that point of time, you should be really that person without any filters and labels, to enable that, to empower that, to see somebody to fail, because that failure is a disruption to their system. And that's the blind spot. But if you are too stuck as a therapist or a coach or a healer in you being successful, you giving a result, how can you allow someone to fail?
So would it be fair to say then that, again, a lot of people out there are pushing people towards their values because that's, they see a value as a strength, but it's actually a fractured strength because it's coming from the wrong place.
Right.
So once you take somebody's identity away, if you like, or shine a light on it, as you sort of mentioned, then naturally their true values will come to the forefront, what their new values. So people get to choose what they want their new value to be. Is that right? And their new identity to be? Is that fair to say?
That's right. So all we are doing is, there is no truth to any things that we are doing in this life, Andy. It's only a different way of looking at it. So all we are looking at it is, are we working out of an empowered space, or are we working from something forced upon us without our knowledge? And as long as you know, this is my choice and I'm doing it, you are safe, because once that ends, you still know you are something without it. But when you are pushed into it or forced into it, or you don't even know you're in it, and once that ends, you are done, you are over. So these values are, we are not saying, and again, in a higher end spectrum, philosophically and spiritually, you don't need values, because life is about flexibility. So there is no value anywhere. However, for a person to move through the stages of this recovery and understanding themselves deeper, at that point, they still need some values to hold on to, but at least they'll be able to choose instead of, and because of that reason, some people can be very much health as their value, or they can have love as their value, or integrity as their value, or trust as their value. And it's almost, they use that value as a judgment against everyone else. If my partner is not same as me, then I don't want this relationship. If my colleagues are not having the same value of so-and-so, then I don't want this to be with these people. Or I don't wear makeup and these people are wearing makeup, then that's not my value. But can you see, the value becomes your judgment. And as long as you're judging, you have expectations. As long as you have expectations, you have attachments. And as long as you have attachments, you cannot move out of that ego, that identity. So that's why on the far end spectrum, after these 6 steps and then in your self-discovery journey, the key is to really see your attachments. But at this point, at least observe your identity conflicts, observe your internal conflicts, and choose, operate from an empowered space. And if you're doing a mistake, know you're doing a mistake and do it. So there's a difference, isn't it? There's a difference in a person eating sugar involuntarily and a person eating sugar by choice and saying, I'll just have fun and finish it. There's a big difference. It's not right. Both the acts are not right. But at least you're operating from choice that you can see. It's your blind spot.
So let's move on then to the next step. Once we've changed the beliefs, the choices, and the values, and we've addressed them. So what's that next step there? Then it sounds like we're getting towards what most people start working on.
Yeah, so that's the outward expression. So now we've talked about the identity conflicts, the internal conflicts, and then the outward expressions. The outward expressions are just behaviors: anxiety, depression, grief, jealousy.
Hang on. So how anxiety and depression and grief, they're a behavior?
Yeah, they're just behaviors. They are behaviors, either learned behaviors or coping mechanisms, or behaviors you have chosen without your knowledge. So you're almost like Pavlov's dog. You're just trained. And that's your natural involuntary response to that situation, to that time, or to that memory, or to that event. Is you're just your Pavlov's dog. That's all you're doing. So anxiety, depression, they're all just the outward expressions of all these. And if you're trying to, it's almost like you're wiping the dog for drooling and you're constantly giving it a new towel and a new towel. It will not stop, isn't it? You can give so many tools, but it will not stop, because the Pavlov's dog, you ring the bell, it will. So do you focus on putting the dog in a room, not wanting to hear the sounds, and will you do that? Or will you focus on changing something fundamental and retraining and giving that basic emotions, and then you're working on it? Right? So if you're working on anxiety and then you're suppressing it, again, what most people do is we misunderstand the mindfulness tools, we misunderstand the meditation tools, we misunderstand the resilience tools. And instead of choosing to use them as empowering tools or enabling tools, we use them as suppression tools. So what happens is, if something is not going right, instead of having the courage to address it, I see people just becoming quiet and controlling themselves. Have the courage to say it and understand, observe why you're not having the courage to say it, instead of becoming mindful and resilient and not choosing not to say anything. So do not escape from your emotions. Do not escape from yourself. Do not distract from yourself. So outward expressions, that is where everybody is working on, that is pushing the car. And you're constantly bringing it down, but how long will you do it? How long will you go and take a shower? How long will you go and shut yourself in a room when something like that happens? How long? So mostly people focus on outward expressions, and they can use it as a lifetime tool. And through that also, if somebody is at least guided, even if you're working for 10 years on your outward expressions, at least if you're guided to something, that there is something out there. So in this observation, bring your awareness to those, basic step 1. At least then there is a result, but you're constantly focusing on, what does people say? Life happens, it's okay, it's normal, because they don't have that knowledge themselves. So that's an outward expression. And as a result of the outward expression, some people can, the final thing is about the stuck state. As a result, they're stuck. They're stuck states. So people can work on stuck states. And I do have coaches who say, I don't want to work on the back end, Manna. I want to work on the front end. So if you are basically unhealthy, even the healthy food you eat is a poison. So no point in feeding yourself all the healthy food, exercising and saying it will do some benefit, because your body and mind are much more powerful than that. They can convert a poison to a vitamin, or a vitamin to a poison, because the body and mind, are protecting themselves. So we have to give, again, abstracts. Can you see? It's nothing logical, isn't it? People can eat absolutely healthy food, leading a very good life, and still they can be in that emotional stuck state. People who are meditating for years, I see this. I have so many clients like that who are practicing all these things, and still they are in that stuck state, because what's the point? You're focusing on being healthy, you're focusing on eating well, you're focusing on exercising, and still you go here because you're missing out on the very fundamental abstracts, the structure to the abstract that you don't know.
That's incredible. And so that's the full 6 steps that you talked about that you have to recover for trauma. Yeah. And I think what would be really good is if we dig into each one of them, and for each thing I know that in Let's Talk Trauma you definitely address a different subject. So this time was anxiety, before it was generational trauma. So it'd be interesting to see if we do more of these in how they're expressed, and how people can go from that full journey for say anxiety, or for depression, or for anything like that. So I think that could be for a future episode of what we do. Sure. But what I love about this is it really is a whole being approach. So you're working first on the body, then on the mind, and then on the person's energy.
That's right.
Is anything you want to add before we close this particular episode?
Yeah, so what is important to understand is trauma is not what you think. And you have to consider not just by mind, body, and energy, but you also have to include elements of spirituality and philosophy to it. And you should be able to go down that path, because life is much more than just experiences. It's much more than just logic and reasoning. You have to get the balance. So if you're feeling stuck, or if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, outward expressions, or if you're in a stuck state, or you have these self-sabotaging identity conflicts, please do reach out and get started. and give yourself one more chance, just one more chance.
Perfect. Thank you, Manna. That was awesome, and we'll definitely catch up on another one very shortly, and we'll dig into these a little bit more. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.